Hi folks, John Dunn here at Immortals Inc. I'm here to talk RPGs. I'm a freelancer and the publisher behind Melior Via. Over here on the boards we got Mikey.
Always an honor, John. What's up today, man?
Well, I've said before I'm not a huge D&D guy anymore, but back in the day I played a lot. And I did talk once before about another D&D book. Do you remember that one?
Not off the top of my head, but define a lot. How many times have you played back then?
Oh, it was 2-3 times a week going from when I was from 1980 up
That's
through
a lot of hours.
up through pushing 2000. Yeah.
But no, I don't. What was the game? What was the one we reviewed last time? What was it?
So, drawing a blank on it. What was the title of it?
We both are.
Yeah.
Even the expert.
Yes. Vault of the something or other? No, it's...
Oh, wait. The tavern or whatever. Wasn't it the tavern?
That's totally, it's the tavern. Tales from the...
The Yawning Portal.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so that was brilliant there.
How?
Right. A while back, we talked about Tales from the Yawning Portal. And I mentioned that was a book that went back and updated some iconic adventures for 5th edition.
Yeah, it's been out here on the shelves for quite some time, so it has a lot of relevancy.
Yeah, well, after Wizards of the Coast published that, Goodman Games went to them and said, hey, we'd like to do more of that. And so they've got a line, and there's 6 of these books in it right now, which they call their Original Adventures Reincarnated. And these are old school adventures that are just updated to 5th edition. I grabbed this guy because Expedition to the Barrier Peaks is one of my favorite old school D&D adventures.
It looks colorful.
And I did in fact run this for 5th edition again for that same group that I was running the Tales campaign for. And yeah, so that artwork there, this is Errol Otis. He's kind of an iconic D&D artist from that era. He's worked on a lot of other stuff, but it's kind of, that 70s trippy art style that really fuels a lot of that early D&D stuff.
You know those kids' playmats where they have like the town on it and it's like a carpet?
Oh, yeah.
It kind of reminds me of that type of vibe.
I can see that, yeah. You're not wrong. So this was the original D&D adventure that was the, Reese's Peanut Butter Cup. You got science fiction in my fantasy. No, you got fantasy in my science fiction. Ooh, 2 great tastes, right? This just basically updates that for 5th edition. It's been done before with other adventures, but this is kind of an iconic take on it. This book is way, way, way thicker than the original adventures. So those were published for, it says here, Official Origins 2 tournament scenario. So Origins has been running a long time. I think this originally was used in 1979, but somebody that knows better may correct me on those dates. In the process of making this book absolutely massive, so this is 400 pages, right? Those original adventures were a lot less than that. But in order to make this so particularly massive, they first off included some intro notes, and they got a couple of luminaries in the field to write about their experience with it. This was an original Gary Gygax adventure. Mikey, you know who Gary Gygax is?
Yeah, you actually mentioned him when we talked about the Yawning Portal. He has anything to do with these covers?
Not the covers, but he's the guy that wrote the stuff that's inside. Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson were the team that created Dungeons & Dragons originally back in the 70s.
Legends.
Yes. The first thing this does is, after it gets through those introductions, is it reprints 2 different versions of the original Expedition to the Barrier Peaks. The first and second printings. There are not a ton of differences. They aren't night and day differences, but you got both versions in there, which means it also includes all the artwork. And one of the things that was really neat about these books back in the day was that it had all these different art pages for when you would introduce scenes to the characters. So when they'd walk into a different room, you could show them a different page and say, look, here, that's what you see in front of you. And that was a really big deal and a big part of this book when it came out originally.
It definitely helps when setting a template for your imagination, I'd suppose.
Oh, no question. And so that was a big deal. Most of this book is black and white. It does reproduce a lot of that black and white art, but there are some color plates too. One of the dungeon maps that's in here, if you look at the map, it actually says Gygax on it as you're going through that part of the dungeon. So it's just,
Easter
one of those
egg.
things. Yeah, the players wouldn't necessarily even get to see it, but... Oh, there it is. EGG. So E. Gary Gygax, his initials.
Egg. That's
Yes.
some pretty epic initials. I love eggs.
Once you get through the 2 reprints, then you dive right into the 5th edition version of it. And that's a little bit of updated art and stat blocks and a little more framing text. And basically, It's the kind of book you'd expect for a 5th edition run through of an adventure. And it also gives you some framing work. So the original one was intended to be run at a convention, and people were kind of in a race to see how far you get through it as part of tournament play. The updated 5th edition is certainly not that. And honestly, a lot more people played this at home than ever played it at the tournament. And so when you were playing in a tournament, you probably had a 4-hour slot to try and get through it. I know when I ran this, it took us months playing once a week to get through the adventure.
Sheesh.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of stuff there. This is a big dungeon. It has 6 levels. This material adds a 7th level to that, and it also adds some framing stuff. So there's stuff in the wilderness outside of the dungeon for you to interact with, and motives for you to interact with these people, which in the original tournament context, or even in the 1st edition version of the adventure, there wasn't any of that. You just started when you walked in the doorway.
In the background behind you is a giant octopus or something like that. What is that?
So that's a plant.
It's a plant.
Yeah, there's a whole part of this dungeon, without getting too spoilery, where there are plants that try to eat you. This is also the adventure that was responsible originally for the Froghemoth. What's a Froghemoth, you ask? It's kind of a giant frog. Yeah, I know. It's a stretch. With these huge tentacles that are kind of elephant-like. It was really cool back in the 70s. There were a lot of drugs back in the 70s. It
People
may not
were
be a
loving
coincidence.
the Froghemoth in the 70s, man.
There you go.
They were too busy being non-sober.
There's some other behind-the-scenes elements here that you can get into. There's some more hooks to get you into the adventure. End of the day, though, it's a way to get robots and lasers and blasters and crazy science fiction stuff in the hands of your player characters, and to really completely change the framing of the adventures you're going through it. This isn't a first level adventure. Your characters have to have been playing for a little bit, right?
Interesting.
But that doesn't mean you have to have been playing for years. As a game master, there's plenty of material here for you, so that even if you haven't been GMing for all that long, you can sink your teeth into it and run this. In terms of your players, probably not going to start off with first level characters. They're probably going to start off, I think, somewhere in the 5th to 8th level range. And this is probably going to get you through a couple of levels, because it is a pretty big dungeon, especially in 5th edition era, where advancement works a little differently back than it did in 1st edition. In terms of how long people need to have been playing, folks, I was running this through, had only been playing for maybe 3 or 4 months, and I think that would be plenty of experience to dive into this.
Understandable. I mean, I kind of like that idea, though. You know, you gotta kind of know your stuff before you dive into some of this.
And really, it's going to change the framing. It's going to open up a lot of possibilities. It's going to encourage people to look at fantasy role-playing in a whole different light. Really, my favorite thing about it is just that fact, that it adds an unexpected element into your fantasy. It doesn't have to be something that stays in there forever, but it is something that's going to keep you on your toes and keep people intrigued by it.
Absolutely.
This is, like I said, a 400-page book. It is $50, but it's $50 that's well served, because it's going to provide you with a whole lot of entertainment.
I thought you were going to say $400 at first. I was going to say, whoa.
No, 400 pages, not $400. And it is up here on the shelf, along with copies of several other books in this series. Temple of Elemental Evil is a box set up there, and Keep on the Borderlands and Into the Unknown, a couple of other ones that are there. Come take a look.
Immortalsinc.com. Link in the description if you want to buy this too.
Thanks for watching.